All right, here you go.
Cool. And then we're going to start with demos, which are going to be a little weird this week, but Ray can go ahead and walk us through it and like see what you all are able to show us today.
All right, so because we don't have any issue from our staff, so I think you guys can share whatever you want to start sharing. Maybe any progress that you can share in last week, this week. Want
So,
to?
oh, sorry.
No, no,
I
I'm
was just
just
gonna,
asking who want to start sharing.
oh yeah. I think we did a couple of different things. We were focused on getting some of our ideas for the app nailed down. So like we came up with an app name. So we voted and decided to go with the name Basket Buddy. Um, we've come up with kind of like a color palette and some general tone words that we wanted to use. And then thank you. Um, Andrea was smart and used ChatGPT to give us some ideas and we kind of went from there. And we made like a mood board and stuff. And Andrea made a Miro. I don't know if you would rather share that on your side, Andrea. I honestly am not like super great at using it yet, but we've started working on like creating a prototype wireframe for our
I,
app.
I think you did a really good job, honestly. So, but yes, I can definitely share just to show, I guess, some artifacts from our week. So give me just a second. Okay, I have found it. Okay, so I should be sharing our Miro board. We started off with voting, and we actually started off in Canva originally to just really easily get some images in. With tallying up, so we voted on our app name, we voted on some fonts, and we narrowed it down to a few color palettes that I think at this point we might still be kind of messing with just to have enough contrast. I did do some accessibility checks in terms of our coloring once we had like an initial, an initial potential wireframe or like a potential layout done, and we found that there just wasn't enough contrast even for UI elements in order to pass at even like a AA standard. So we're kind of messing with something that's a little higher contrast at the moment. Um, and so we have a rough landing page, and we are working on a list page and also potentially a manage list page. I think we may have discussed merging the manage list with the list page, since it seems potentially a little more user-friendly to have items on that list already viewable or accessible to the user rather than having to switch to another page. But we're also going with a mobile first design, which is why we have gone with the little template that resembles a phone. And we have a little blank spot right now for our desktop view. I think we're going to focus on the mobile first to have an MVP going. And then if we have time, then we can think about what that may look like if we want something different on a desktop view. So quick look at our inspo. We had some pretty, I think, cohesive ideas in general about what we wanted our app to look like, which was fun, but clean and a little quirky, modern. Can't remember some of our other other words right now off the top of my head, but yeah,
Organic, natural
yes, yeah,
keyboards.
yep. So that's kind of what we've got going. We also did decide to go with Tailwind because it's something that I think all of our collabs have at least some experience with. We played around with the idea of maybe trying something new, but I think since we are on a bit of a timeline, we didn't want to throw an extra wrench in there. Yeah. I think that's what we've got for now.
Cool. It's really nice actually. I just learned about the VC AG color contrast from the document that you shared to me. I mean, I never used that one before, so it's something new for me. Thanks for sharing.
Awesome. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, so I did, I guess for, let me go ahead and share this actually. I guess that might be a little easier.
And yeah, Andrew, I think you already kind of like highlighted over some of the things that I was playing around with, but because of I was like going through the doc that you made, I was like, let me try and play around with this. I was thinking potentially like if we did an off-white color instead of that like pale yellow for our background, like it would make it easier to have some of the other colors have more contrast and stuff. So that's kind of what I was playing around with. I was also using that tool to try to check and see how accessible it was looking.
Yeah, it was really helpful actually to realize that essentially none of the color combos we had, if used against each other, would actually stand out. So I put together just a quick document, and essentially I put a picture of the Basket Buddy component that we had, the background and the foreground colors that I used to check. And then I used two different resources, webaim.org and accessibleweb.com, and they both did WCAG color contrast checking. So this one was just a link so that I didn't have to put quite so many screenshots in, but it was very similar to this screenshot, which I believe was from Accessible Web. And essentially it shows the compliance results if we're using small text, large text, UI components, and the two levels of compliance, which are AA, AAA. It gives you the contrast ratio here, and it gives you like a little sample of what the two colors kind of look like in those three elements that they're checking. Ones that passed, I highlighted in green. Ones that did not pass, I highlighted in a red, and you can definitely see here that there's no way we would be able to actually differentiate that easily. And then I think there was one that like passed most things except for one. And I highlighted that in orange. So yeah, that's kind of what we started off with for accessibility.
Nice. This is really something that I never think before. So cool.
Yeah, I really love that you all are putting this thought in from the beginning so that I think it'll allow you to have a design that works a lot better for accessibility as opposed to deciding on your design and then checking accessibility and then just tweaking it. I feel like baking it in from the start is the way to ensure it's like the most accessible design that you can have. So that's really cool to see how thorough you are looking at this. I'm also really impressed with just the process you all have been building into this whole thing. It's a really this starting this week, it's a lot less structured than we're used to. So the fact that you all have been able to build some structure for yourselves is really great to see.
Yeah, it's really great progress actually. It's kind of like difficult to planning everything at the beginning.
I also love the name. And using ChatGPT was such a good idea. For like that kind of thing is really can be really hard, but that's exactly the kind of thing ChatGPT is good at, is just like giving you a bunch of ideas. And even if you don't love them, you could always get some inspo from them and build off of it. So that's good thinking.
Yeah, I think this week has been kind of tough actually without that built-in structure and having to find that structure for ourselves and find the new like workflow almost. I think that's been kind of the biggest challenge for this week.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like, oh, okay, now we're doing design, like it'll be easy breezy. But it's so difficult. So yeah, it's awesome. I'm excited to see how these designs come together for y'all. Was there anything else y'all wanted to talk about before we move into discussion? Okay, then we can move into discussion. So the past 2 weeks we have had, let me pull up the, we've had our learning mode modules on job interview topics. And if I can share my desktop. Okay, so if I could make this bigger. And we were on week 6 and 7. So we had what to ask your interviewers and then how to rock the technical interview. Is there one that y'all would prefer to start talking about? They're kind of, they're both on similar topics, so we can always just go sequentially and bleed in from one to the other if there's no preference. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about what to ask your interviewers first. Any takeaways from this module? Any thoughts in general about this topic? Have y'all in the past, if you've done interviews or mock interviews, what kinds of questions do you usually ask in interviews? Did this kind of align with your experience at all?
As someone who's been going through 2 interview processes over the last couple of weeks, I very much was utilizing these modules to aid me in that process. I found it very helpful, just because it can be hard to, like, you need to ask questions and then trying to decide what to ask. You might have like a whole list of questions that you come up with, but like, what are the most pressing? What are the most important ones? I think he mentioned like also just like making sure like you're interviewing for the company, but at the same time, like you should also be interviewing them. Like, are they a good fit? I think that's like a really important concept to like ask about their culture and like the subject pieces that really matter to you. And I found that really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind is that you also want to make sure that this is a company you want to work at. And I think that having questions that you actually care about the answer to, as opposed to just asking a question that you think they want to hear, I feel like an interviewer will be able to tell the difference if it's a really specific question or like an intentional question. And I think that comes across as it makes you look good also if you're asking a question with some intention behind it. So I think that's definitely a good point to keep in mind. How do you all feel when you get to that part of an interview or mock interview of like, what questions do you have for me? Do you feel like, um, I don't know, do you feel nervous asking questions, or do you kind of have a rote set of questions that you usually ask, or how do you kind of approach that?
I've tried to prep kind of like a small set of questions that I typically ask. Like one that I really like doing is asking about their feedback process, because I feel like that piece is important to me, to have feedback and have it in a constructive way and have it in a way that's like fairly frequent or maybe consistent rather than just like maybe once a year we're going to do your yearly review and that's going to be it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I like having like a small set that I know I'm going to want to know.
that's a great question to ask too. And I feel like that, again, like that's the kind of question that gives insight to you as an applicant as well. It's like, oh, this is someone who likes to improve on their work, like wants to get feedback and incorporate that in. So yeah, I think it's definitely helpful to have some that you fall back on, but also preparing if there's like doing some research on the company and thinking about, if you have anything specific, like having a mix of those two types of questions, I think is a great approach.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I try to do like there's a few that I typically have that I would want to ask any company. Like I usually have, if they haven't explained already, I usually ask about like kind of like how this position would fit into into like the organization, like what the team looks like and like how it all fits together. And I also like to ask about like professional development programs that they have, or like what kind of programs or resources do they have for like continual learning.
That's another really good one to ask.
Yeah, I like to ask that as well. It's a good one.
One thing I would say, I can't remember if this was covered in the talk, but when you're doing an interview, it's also really good to know who is going to be interviewing you so that you can refine your questions for that person. Like a recruiter is going to have different insight than like the manager of the position versus maybe a peer or like a project manager. Those are all going to be people who have general insight into the job, but from a slightly different perspective. And so if you know who is going to be interviewing you and if you understand what that job is, like I know I had an interview with like um, a product manager and I didn't know what that job did. So that was like really stressful to me to like, I didn't realize until it got into the interview exactly what her position was. And then I didn't understand how to ask her questions. So I just asked her generic questions and it was okay. But I definitely think it is it can be very helpful to understand what your relationship with that person would be. So you can, maybe a recruiter or a manager would have more insight into professional development things than maybe like someone who's going to be another developer on your team. They might not have as much insight to that, and they might have more insight into the daily tech that you'll be using or the workflow that you'll be following. So that can be really helpful. Not to scare you, this is actually why it's good to prepare, like have fallback questions and prepare. I once had an interview with like the director of the position I was applying for, and I think he asked me one question, like tell me about yourself, and then it was just, okay, what questions do you have for me? And I was like, I wasn't like thinking it would be 30 minutes of me asking questions, but I've got enough to handle that. So yeah, having some fallback is definitely useful. That's how I got through that.
That sounds terrifying because I
Yeah, it
always
was.
have questions, but like not that many.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared to be like driving the interview, but yeah, it's just thinking of it as a conversation and thinking of it as your opportunity to learn more about the job that you're applying for, and also just like learn from this person that you're talking to. I think that can make it a little less scary. Yeah. But yeah, that can be a little bit stressful, but just try and think of it as a conversation and like try and go into it with that mindset of just, I want to learn from this person. And then if you learn from them, if you don't get the job, it's like, well, I still learned, about this technology, or I learned about this workflow or something. And that can be a way of not getting too discouraged if interviews aren't going the way that you want them to. Just looking at it as an opportunity to learn, I think can be a helpful way of not getting so discouraged.
I'm also sometimes thinking about when I have interview, it's kind of like doing virtual coffee chat with anybody. So try to use like the moment of interview to learn something from the person, I guess. So it's kind of like you will less scary, and then that's kind of like precious moment when you have like someone have more level, higher level than you, and then try to get information from them, something like that, I guess.
Totally. Yeah, like as like obviously your main goal going into a job interview is you want to get the job, but it is a really good networking opportunity too, and like getting to talk to people who have different perspectives or different experiences than you. So yeah, they're scary, but there are ways to make them feel a little bit less scary. Cool. Anyone else have any thoughts about this learning module? Okay. Yeah, the best thing is just more practice makes it less scary. So that was what to ask your interviewers. And then next we talked about how to rock the technical interview. This was a video. Let me, so yeah, this was, the video was just about kind of how to approach the technical interview in a way to set yourself up for success. How do we feel about technical interviews in general? Do we feel like we kind of have a sense of like how to approach them? Do we feel like we are craving more practice with them? I still feel that way. Like technical interviews stress me out. So
I know for my end, the very first one I did was a pair programming one, and I completely failed to understand. It was my first time pair programming, which was probably a terrible idea. And so it just went horrific. It was horrific, absolutely. And now that I've had more experience pair programming, I definitely feel more comfortable in situations like that, hopefully. But I can still see like being in that situation and having my mind go completely blank. Yeah, I'm sure that's gonna happen.
I feel
and I
like
think that's, oh, go ahead, Davina.
you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's very normal. I think everyone knows that these are scary. So if you have an empathetic interviewer, you know, they know that it's nerve-wracking and hopefully they'll be kind. Yeah, Davina, what's your experience been with
Oh,
technical
I mean,
interviews?
I had my first actual one this month, and then I've had 3 others since then. And only one of them do I feel like, oh yeah, I like did that super well. And the other 3, I was like, I completely lost my train of thought and did not go anywhere with this. I think something about technical interviews, even if you, because all of the technical questions that I was asked in all 4 were things that if I were not doing them for an interview, I would have been able to solve pretty easily. In the moment though, it's like, okay, wait, what do I do next? I don't remember. Like it's losing that train of thought when you're under pressure is kind of the most difficult part for me. And so I think that I've been more successful by like communicating my thought process than like completely solving the problem. But that's just the strategy that I implemented to get through. So
I think that's a really good strategy that I would recommend everyone try and fall back on is like if you are if you're doing one of these like live like pair programming or like working through a like some kind of a whiteboarding problem, talking as much as you can so that your interviewer can understand where you're trying to go. Because it's really easy to just be thinking about something and then everything's happening in your head and they have no idea what's happening. And if you run out of time, it's like, well, I don't know where they were going with that. So I like can't really say with confidence that they know what they're doing. Whereas if you're talking through it, maybe you run into a hurdle. Maybe if they're, maybe your interviewer can help you get over that hurdle and continue on, or if not, they can at least understand what you're trying to do and have more insight into what you're doing. So, um, definitely talking, like thinking out loud is a really, really good thing to do, in these interviews. Even if you feel silly, like you're like, I don't quite know what this is, but I think this reminds me of this other thing, or this is how I would usually try and approach it. Um, Verbalizing as much as you can your thought process can be really helpful.
Yeah, uh the interview about technical interview that I learned also sometimes you can ask about him actually with the interviewer. I don't know, this is something that I learned when I'm doing whiteboarding a lot. So after you saying about talking a lot about your thought process and then for example you stuck and then I think asking a hint also is kind of like fine because the goal, I think every interviewer, the goal is like make you success. So they also want you to be success at the interview. Sometimes they will give you like hint for you guys.
Yeah, if you're stuck, there's no harm in asking for help, right? Like try and do what you can, but if you're like, I think it's this, does that make sense to you? Or like, I'm really stuck. Like, can you give me a hint about what I should do next? Showing that vulnerability and being able to ask questions can also be a positive thing, like as opposed to someone who just like plows through it and is like, I've got this. Like, that's not necessarily a helpful attitude to have. So showing that you're able to collaborate and take direction and admit when you don't know something um, can definitely be a benefit in an interview. It's scary, but it can be good. Oh.
I was just gonna say I had a similar reaction as Davina. Like I had one, I don't know, maybe like a month ago, and I had a similar like panic brain where I just was like, I've forgotten everything I ever knew. But that one was also strange because he specifically said like you don't need to verbalize your thought process. So, and I probably should have anyway because I did it because I thought it would be easier because I find it hard sometimes to like think and talk at the same time. But maybe I should have because maybe that would have like kind of helped things along. I don't know, but I just thought that was very strange because I was like prepared for him to say or prepared for it to be like a verbal thing since that's what I think they typically are.
Yeah,
So
that
that's kind of
is
weird.
that is odd. I'm not sure why he would say that, but um yeah, brain farts happen to everyone. And like I think I think interviewers generally understand that too. So like one huge benefit for interviewing from home is that like I had like sticky notes all over my monitor of like, don't forget to say this, or like, like this is the process of like how you want to structure your answer and things like that. Like it was, I don't even know if I actually looked at them because I was so nervous, but just having them as like my safety blanket of like, these are the things that I absolutely want to remember in an interview. Um, and then if you forget how to do something, it'll depend on the interview, whether, be like, I know that there is like a an array method that I can use to do this, but I am totally blanking on the name. Like you can either maybe can you tell me what it is, or is it okay if I check MDN? That'll depend on the structure of the interview, but like it doesn't hurt to ask at least if you can do something of like I know this exists, but I am just so nervous. I'm having like my brain is completely blank. Like, can you help me out? Is if they say no, then like you're in no different position than you were before. But like at least expressing that. And yeah, I don't know what I would have done in that interview if he said don't verbalize. I probably would have done the same thing as you, Emily, of just like, okay, I guess I won't say anything. But I think maybe like if that ever happens again for some reason, I would just whatever. I'm just gonna talk through it. Um, yeah, I haven't heard of that before, but every interview is different. Have any of you done had any luck with like practicing technical interviews with any, like there's a few different services or like websites that allow you to practice technical interviews? Has anyone tried any of those before? Like Cramp or yeah, there's a few. If you are the type, I definitely am, that gets very nervous about technical interviews, it can definitely be helpful to do some of those. I know we've also at TCL we've got I think you'll be hearing about that this week, if not next, about just like how to do some of those um, mock interview like through our service. But there are also additional ones, and I'll share it on our board, but there is we have a job search resources repo at TCL that has, for example, preparing for interviews. These are some of the different resources that are linked here. So yeah, Preamp is one of them. And then these are some like questions that you can ask. I also think I have, maybe not. Oh yeah. I'm not logged into Twitter, so you can't see it, but I'll share some of these additional resources for if you're feeling nervous about interviews in general, but especially I know technical interviews can be ones that are more specific to obviously to tech than maybe your previous careers. And so that's, I think, where a lot of people tend to feel a little bit more unprepared. And so getting practice, I think, is just the easiest way to feel a little bit better about that.
Can I just say to like the other devs in the group who haven't used this resource yet, the link that you shared last week that you just went to with the TCL like job search resources, I was using that a ton and it was really helpful for me, like everything in all of those files. Especially some of the, because I think like the technical interview is for me the hardest part. I think we've all probably gone through a behavioral interview at some point, but technical is something that's like an entirely different beast. So all of these resources actually really helped me personally, if any of you guys are like going through job interviews in the future.
That's awesome to hear. Thanks for sharing that, Davina. I'll pop the link in the chat, but I will also it is right now we have it in our repo here next to the LinkedIn profile, but I'll add it as a resource next to the interviews too, just so it's easier to find. But yeah, it's awesome. These are just, and also this is like a TCL repo, if you have resources that you've found to be really helpful and you want to like add them, feel free to open a PR and we can like add additional resources to this as well, just to help future collabs. Cool. Anything else we want to talk about in general about interviews, feeling prepared for them? Cool. Well, if you have any questions as you are like going into interviews or any takeaways, feel free to continue the discussion on Slack with everyone. But if there's nothing else, then I guess we can transition into planning for the week ahead. So usually this is like us telling you what issues to work on, but this week there are no official issues for you to work on other than 14 that you've already been looking at. So I think Ray is going to help us to just kind of talk about what you want to do this week.
All right, so I think this is kind of like open discussion, right, for everybody. Anyone want to start? Like, what is the first planning that you want to do maybe next week?
I think what I noticed at least was that I think our list item timer is broken at this point. I was testing it out yesterday, and I happened to notice that one of the items that I checked off, and then I navigated away and came back, and it was already unchecked. So I think there's something funky going on there, and I'd like that to be potentially like a priority in the next week to get it fixed so that we have the full app functionality back.
Okay, maybe we can try to assign who want to solve that issue that we have right now.
I'm happy to look at it again.
Cool, sounds good. So it's for Andrea. Anything else?
If you, because I think you and I were originally the assignees for that, so if you need help looking at that, let me know, Andrea, and we can pair program and try to figure it out together.
Sounds good.
Andrea, is it related that we talked last time about the use effect too?
I think potentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Let me know if you need help too.
Okay.
Cool. So issue for timer. Anything else for we need to do next week?
I can't remember. I feel like I noticed something and I would need to test it out to completely confirm, but I feel like I noticed that when you select a list, I don't feel like it like navigates anywhere. You have to like go then to your list page or to manage lists, and I feel like it would make more sense when you click on a list to then navigate to the list page instead of just staying on the homepage and not being 100% sure if you selected it or not. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
I
that's a
think that
good.
would be an easy one.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then it should be small things. The-
I think having when you do navigate to the list too, adding it so that it displays which list you're on.
Mm.
I think that one's important. And I think we discussed this in one of our meetings where right now the selecting the like when you'll need to buy it again when you're adding a new item, I don't think that's required right now. And so it kind of does little weird things in the back end. So I think making so that it's required to select when you anticipate it'll need to be purchased again. Trying to think what it's called, like the purchase urgency. Is that what it's
Purchase
called?
urgency when you're
Yeah.
adding an item. Yeah. Potentially like, so of course we're gonna continue doing all this styling and stuff, but potentially each one of us could take like an issue, like one of the things that we wanted to improve for our app and work on that this week in addition to that. So I can take I can do the navigation after selecting a list and like adding the list name UI element.
What was the last one? The making the purchase urgency required.
Yeah, so like, yeah, making that like
I can-
required, like, so that like right now the user can add an item and it's not required that they like select a
Select
purchase
them.
urgency. So if they like put a name in and then they don't select a purchase urgency, it'll just add today's date as like the next purchase date instead of like 7 days from now or 14 days from now,
Yeah.
or 30 days from now.
Mhm.
So we're
Okay.
like wanting to make that a required input in that form.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Do we also want to figure out whether we want to move some of that functionality into the list page as well, like adding an item while you can see the other items that are on the list?
I think that makes sense just because like when you add an item right now, like when you add an item right now, it like says item added successfully and then the page stays the same and it's kind of like weird. I do think it makes more sense to like be on the same page and see like, oh, popped up, great, let me add a new item, or like, okay, I'm ready to shop or share this list. I do think that it makes sense to combine those two.
Emily, do you think you'd be okay with just moving that little chunk into list page as well?
Yeah, would it just be the adding an item? I could see like a benefit to keeping like the sharing functionality in a different page and then maybe like, do we have a way to delete a list?
Not, yeah, that's the other one. Not yet. We don't have a way to
Oh
delete
yeah,
a
so that
list.
might be also something we could put on the manage list page.
Yeah.
But I think it does make sense to have the functionality to add an item to a list to the list page.
So I think it sounds like we probably won't be able to cover all of these like features and tweaks this week, and that's totally fine. But maybe we want to create issues now for the ones that we're talking about, even if we don't have time to get to it, but just so that we kind of are all on the same page about what the AC kind of looks like for those issues um, before we split up. Yeah. I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'll add the issue for the one I said I would take on with the navigating and selecting a list.
Do you want to share your screen and do it together? Are you comfortable with that?
Sure, let's do it. I will share screen. So make this go away. New issue. Maybe okay. It's oh, I can't remember. Did they have like the pound sign in front of them, or was it just like 17?
I think it will be automatically numbered, so you just need to put the title.
Okay, cool. So as a user, I want to navigate to the list page automatically after selecting a list. And so on selecting a list, the user is navigated to the list page. On the list page, there is a UI element with the name of the currently selected list. Is there anything you guys would add to this?
I think that's
I think
what
that's
was discussed.
this page. Yep.
Nice. Thanks, Davina.
Yeah, thank you. I'll do that.
Submit.
My computer is being really slow.
There we go.
There we go.
And do you want to assign yourself to that too?
Yeah, let me move this away again.
Sweet.
Cool.
And I think Andrea already created an issue for the list item timer, right?
Yeah, sort of. So originally it was just for refactoring
Ah,
something that worked, but I don't think it's working at the moment. So
gotcha.
should I edit it so that this to like get it to work again?
Yep.
Okay.
I think that works.
Yeah. I think if you want to do refactor in the same issue, also fine.
Hmm.
Okay. So I guess I'll share my screen. So as a user, I want a list item to uncheck itself after 24 hours being checked as purchased. So this is the original just the comment that I had included, which was updating the use effect in list items so that there's no longer a warning about missing dependencies. But I think it now needs to have, I guess, refactor I can't remember what the function is called. Probably it's in the use effect functionality. So that the list item remains selected for 24 hours. And also the list item, I guess I'll reword that. The list item remains selected for 24 hours after being checked off. The list item displays as unselected after 24 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not loving that wording, but
You can tweak it if you think of something. It's hard. I feel like live writing sentences is harder than live coding sometimes.
Yes.
yep.
Yes.
What is English?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm gonna keep that last bit for now here, because I think it's just a good reminder. But like I think Ray and I had discussed in office hours.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that should be enough. It will be a lot, I guess. Fixing bug. I know that's kind of like complicated, this part.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Oh, okay. Looks a little funky too, but
All good.
all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then do you want to assign yourself to that one, Andrea?
Oh, yep, I will do that. Okay.
Okay, Emily, do you want to write one for, and we can workshop this together because I think there was a little discussion about what you're going to be working on.
Um,
Oh,
Okay.
FYI, it didn't automatically, I just changed it, but it didn't automatically update the number. So you do need to type the number before the
Oh,
title.
yeah.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
Oh.
So what number are we on then?
It'll be 18.
7. Oh, yeah, 18.
Okay.
I actually do have a question about
Mhm.
that because I see that like we've numbered it like 15, 16, 17, but if you look underneath that in like the smaller text, it's like number 38.
Yeah.
So when we do the pull request and we're writing like closes whatever number, then we'll be putting it in that like smaller number, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's fine if we want to number them just for our reference of like what order we want to tackle them in. But usually you wouldn't need to like manually add a number. I think those numbers were added for like just for TCL workflow, so we know what order that they're being done in. But like GitHub or Jira, they're going to automatically add a number for you, and that'll usually be the number you reference. But we'll just stick with it since this is kind of what we're used to. But yeah, the auto-generated number is the one that actually does the linking and everything. So yeah, so as a user,
Like I want to be required to select a purchase urgency when adding an item.
Yep.
Right. Okay. The purchase urgency field is required to submit the new item form.
perfect.
Anything else? Because I think, and we already fixed, there was the issue with the number of days being different. I forget what there's like different between the drop down and then the
The
soon
sorting,
and not soon
right?
sorting. Yeah, but do we fix that already? Davina, was that you that?
The difference between the, like, I'm sorry, I guess I don't understand what you're asking there.
Like there was a cup like last week or the week before we were doing the sorting. And we had put like, when we were doing the sorting, it was like 7 days, 30 days, and less than between 30 and 60 days or something. But then it was different when in the drop down, it was like 7, 14, and 30 maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I fixed the part that Andrea and Ray had pointed out where if you added an item as not soon, which is the 30 days, it would pop up as kind kind of soon, I think, and it's because we had used the like less than or equal operator, so for that, so I just changed it to the like less than operator, and that fixed the problem there. As far as the like, I mean, so we did it according to the issue, and I think I kind of, after thinking about it, understand why they did it the way they did it. Where like if it's less than 7 days, it's soon, and between 7 and 30 is kind of soon. And then more than 30 is not soon. I kind of understand just because like 14 is a very specific number. It's the middle number, not exactly the middle, but like technically like anywhere between 7 and 30, like I kind of understand why they did that. Because not everything's going to be 14 days, or it's, you know, there's going to be 12, there's going to be 18. So like I kind of understand why they did it that way. So like I think that makes sense, but I did fix the part where it wasn't showing up as not soon if they selected not soon as the option from the drop down. So that does display correctly.
Okay. So it's working as intended
Yeah, I think so.
right now.
Yeah, there's definitely a discrepancy, I think, just in the way that I think we were thinking about it, Emily, with how we selected it and like the categories that we selected it as versus
Mm-hmm.
what they wanted as the AC to sort as
Right.
for the list. And I think that's why we got a little confused there.
Okay.
I do think it
Um,
should make sense as like from the user perspective, because now like if you were to, when you're first adding an item, it's going to show up as you see it in the drop down. Like it's going to say soon if you select 7, or like um not soon if you select 30, or kind of soon if you select 14.
That makes sense.
okay.
So I know we also were talking about moving add item to the list page. Do we want to make that a separate issue? Just thinking of like, I suppose those are both in the same, like it's working in the same component. So maybe we can just rename this issue if we want to make that part of it. So maybe as a user, I want a smoother experience adding items to the list or something like that. And then we can cover making the urgency field required and making the add item form display with the list. Does that make sense to y'all? Okay, so Emily, maybe we want to say something like, as a user, I want a streamlined experience adding a new item to the list or something like that.
And then the add item form
Yeah.
is on the list view instead of manage list.
And just for documentation, we might want to make a note that we still want to keep managed list as existing for the reasons you were saying, Emily, that maybe sharing and deleting the list can be separate from the list view.
Mm-hmm.
Just
So that would be like another AC, you mean?
yeah, we can make
Or
it as an AC or just a note.
just to like
Whatever
one
makes
note,
sense to you.
or I guess yeah, I guess it doesn't have to be an AC, but like note, we're planning to keep the manage list view
For sharing and deleting a list.
function on the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure you would probably remember, but sometimes you have these discussions about what you're doing and then you go to start working, you're like, what did we say? Like I have no idea. So it's helpful to just kind of like, since that could be a confusing thing, just have a note. Cool.
Do we think it'll be confusing to have two input boxes on the list because there's already the one for searching?
I think if we format it correctly, like with the styling, we can make it pretty clear on which function is for which.
What would be cool if this is like a bigger thing probably, but it would be cool if we could combine them somehow.
Mm.
That would be a bigger issue probably, but like type it in if there's an existing item, you can, well, I don't know. I would need to think about it. But
That'd be
I
like
guess
a
for now we can,
stretch goal.
yeah, for now we can just like have them both. And yeah, think about if there's a way to combine them in the future.
Did we
Nice.
want to like shoot Shane a message and see? I mean, obviously he's not gonna respond now, but like one of the things we were talking about is like the deleting the list functionality. So maybe like if he wants to take that on as his refactoring thing for the week.
I was also thinking about another thing that we had discussed, which was adding like pop-ups or like Toastify to our project instead of having the kind of ugly alerts.
I think we could definitely like I do want to do that. I think it's a lot better than what it's doing now. Like
Yeah.
maybe as part of our styling or like after we're done styling. I don't know if Toastify, I haven't really looked into it yet, but like how much you can, I don't know how much you can like customize that, but like if it is at all customizable, like maybe something we do after we style it so it kind of goes with our theme.
Mhm.
I think you can customize it a bit. So yeah, maybe Davina and Andrea, do you want to, after our call, write up issues for both of those features that you're talking about, just so we can remember, and then maybe we can see if Shane, maybe if he's able to look into the delete list. If I think he said he has a little bit more capacity this week, so maybe he would be up for at least trying that. And if not, maybe he could look into Toastify or another issue that y'all are thinking about, like with styling and everything. So yeah,
Do we want to also make an issue just for installing Tailwind too? I think that's, I mean, that should be
I think that's a good idea. Do you want to go ahead and
simple.
write that up, Emily? Yeah, I think
Mhm.
like anything y'all are talking about, just writing an issue for it, even if it ends up being something you change your mind, you can go edit it. Or if you decide not to do it, you can delete it. But just having it in one place, I think that way if someone has capacity to start looking at something else, they can just pick something up from your backlog. That's a good way of doing it. So yeah. Cool. All right, so we're
For my
at the
own
top.
brain's sake, sorry.
No, you're good.
So we're adding issues for Tailwind, installing Tailwind, the Toastify, and I've already blanked on the last the last thing.
Deleting a list.
Reading list. Okay. All right. Thank you.
No, that's a good a good call. So we're at the end of the hour. So we can go ahead and break if y'all want to strategize anymore. I think Ray, we can keep this Zoom running if
Yeah,
we want to,
sure.
right?
Andrew's going to go view cherry blossoms. We had
Oh,
discussed
nice.
using this time as well, just because it is like we're all already here, but
It's a nice day for it.
Yeah, I
Well,
can hang around
relatively.
for a little bit. We'll be fine.
I mean, yeah, if there's anything y'all want to wrap up before you split up, feel free. Ray, do you want to maybe stop the
I will
recording?
stop recording first.